I have emptied a pot of lentils into the ashes for you. If you have picked them out again in 2 hours' time, you shall go to the ball with us. Mean. Hi everyone, I'm Andy. Welcome to Furniture Fairy-Fables. If you have seen any of my other fables, you will know that I am not at all afraid of using color. Rich, bold, well-designed modern paint colors are fantastic at helping the flipper to refresh an otherwise unwanted piece of furniture. And in many cases, they are the inspiration for my overall redesign concept. But as much fun as it is using color, mastering the art of the modern neutral is not a bad idea if you are interested in selling or keeping pieces for yourself. And right now, the very on-trend look of 2 finishes achieved with a single-toned medium is great news for the busy flipper or for anyone wishing to achieve this very enchanting look. I had a blast picking up this solid double-level console table. The couple who was giving it away was packing up to move out to Arkansas to be closer to their daughter after living here in the Bay Area for over 40 years. The gentleman was happy to share that he had done everything from building houses to owning a chicken ranch down in Southern California that turned out to be right in the way of a little amusement park that was being built at the time. This, of course, was Disneyland. You know, sometimes when you pick up a piece of unwanted furniture, you get to meet someone you never otherwise would have, and you get a little glimpse into their life. I love that about this work. This console table was strong and solid, but her dress was very stained. It seemed to have also picked up some paint at some point. I started off the way I always do, giving the table a good cleaning, this time using Dawn dishwashing soap, and clearly way too much of it. It looks like I wasn't paying attention at the sink. I added some more water and then started scrubbing. You can tell I really go for it when I clean, getting in there with my scrub brush and making sure to also get the underside of any pieces I'm working with. And because I had used way too much soap with this piece, I actually used the spray nozzle on the hose to make sure I did a very thorough rinse. After that, I got off the majority of the water with a towel and then let the table dry in the sun before I began my sanding. One of my all-time favorite looks for a console table is wood-toned horizontals and painted everything else. And this fun, scrolling, pseudo-modern, maybe neoclassical table with its curved and forking lower level and outset wood-grained top was a perfect candidate for just that look. Using my Surf Prep electric ray sander, I carefully started removing the top coat as well as that very dated, very orangey stain. I know I give this particular shade of stain a lot of grief. But don't get me wrong, I do actually like some warmer wood stains. But this shade, which was used a lot 30 to 40 years ago, just does not look natural at all to me. And in my opinion, it doesn't really set off any other colors all that nicely either. So I started with a 100 grit pad and went carefully as I watched for any sign of weakness in the veneer. But I was in luck. This table was really well built and both levels had lovely thick veneers to work with. My Surf Prep did a great job getting right up to the edges of those table legs, and then I just got any remaining stain by hand. So after removing the majority of that very dated stain, I used a 150, then 180, and then finally 220 grit paper to prep those horizontals, and used that 220 to also just do a little bit of scuff up of the rest of the finish so that it would be ready for the paint that I had in mind. I brought the console table over to the other side of the house and gave it a good wipe down with a damp microfiber cloth to remove any dust, and then I got ready to make my paint wash. I decided to do this to-finish effect with a paint wash, and I'm using Goddess Ashwagandha by Fusion Mineral Paint. This is a gorgeous neutral. I added a little bit to my jar and then added about half of that amount of water. So this was more like a 2 parts paint to 1 part water mix. If you aren't sure how intense you would like your wash to be, I'd suggest starting with a 1-to-1 ratio, and then you can do more layers if you would like more color. I honestly don't know if I would call this a creamy white or a beigey gray or a stony cream, but it's one of those great neutrals that just looks great with lots of other colors and tones. And it's a little warm, but not nutty, not peanutty like our original finish. And it can also look cool without being icy. I applied the wash across that lower horizontal layer, and as you can see, I don't have to worry at all about the legs or any of that base because they will eventually be painted in solid Goddess Ashwagandha. So then, using my lint-free cloth, I wiped back that wash while it was still damp. Here you can see the difference of the paint washed lower level and that raw top. The raw top is so much more golden, and our paint wash has effectively cooled down that yellow. Okay, so next I applied the wash to the top of the table. I knew I wanted to get the entire top covered before I wiped that paint wash back so that my wiping action could cover the entire span of the tabletop. So I worked as quickly as I could. Again, no worries about those drips when you are doing a single medium technique. I did make sure to get that wash into all of the grain of that tabletop, and then finished off with long side-to-side brush strokes. Okay, so that wash has been sitting there for a good while, maybe a couple of minutes, but you can see it is absolutely still coming off onto my cloths, and we are starting to see that wood grain reappear. Here's where having a misting bottle is super helpful though, and definitely misting as opposed to spraying. If you find your wash is getting a little too dry and sticky to wipe back, just give it a light misting and you will find that that paint will start moving again. You can really use your misting bottle as you go if you would like to remove more of your paint wash or to smooth out any blotchy or uneven areas. If this were an oil-based stain, I would of course need to be wearing gloves, probably a respirator, and I definitely could not be using water to help me even anything out. Now that I have my horizontals paint washed or faux stained, I started painting all of the other surfaces. I'm using one of my favorite brushes here. This is the Zibra Chiseled Wedge brush because I think that with all of the very different details, it will be pretty great at handling everything. Here you can see how good it is at cutting in as I bring that solid paint right up to the stained surface. And you can also see another great thing about this single medium technique. It is so forgiving. You know, my mom and my conducting professor used to always say, transitions are the hardest part of anything. And honestly, I agree. I think the same thing also goes for furniture detailing. For a table like this, where the transition between what is some sort of faux stain wood grain appearance and solid painted texture, where that meeting point is so visible, using the same medium just in different strengths is much easier than, say, if I had decided to stain the top a dark walnut and maybe paint the table a bright blue. That's, of course, completely doable, and you might even see me do that in a future fable, but there's a lot to be said for this technique. Once I started painting the legs, I noticed that there were some little random holes that did not look super good painted. So I stopped what I was doing, wrapped up my brush, and filled those holes with some wood filler. Then once that filler had a chance to dry, I came back in with a 220 sanding paper and cleaned up those spots. Then I began taping off those little bits of paint-washed wood that met up with the legs of the table so as to protect that finish when I came back in with the full-strength paint. Then I gave the table another quick wipe down to remove any of that wood filler dust, and then started painting again. To get all around and in the details of those carved ends of the table legs, I used the scrub-a-dub-dub technique. That's when you move your brush in circles like you're scrubbing a dish you were cleaning in the sink. You know, a rounded brush would be great for this part, but you can see that the wedge brush is doing just fine. Probably the most important part is just how packed the brush is with bristles. And I've found that the Zibra brushes have great density and therefore they hold a lot of paint. You can also see what great coverage I'm getting with this first layer of the Fusion paint. And happily, this piece was not a bleeder, so there was no need for a primer. While that first coat on the legs was drying, I did a second coat along the top trimmed edge. And again, you can see just how great this brush cuts in. It's just really a great all-around brush. Back to the bottom of the legs, I added that second coat of paint, and while it was still wet, I peeled back that painter's tape that was protecting my faux stain. And then I could work on the rest of the base, where that paint would come up to meet the stained level. My Zibra brush happily made quick work of that bottom trim, as well as those fabulous pumpkin bun feet. Don't they look just like those ridged pumpkins that we see in October that are the same shape as the pumpkin turned into Cinderella's carriage by the fairy godmother? Does that make my paintbrush my magic wand? For that tight curve on the inside of that forked lower level, I got out my Zibra square brush, and it was just the right size to cleanly make those cut-ins. I let the whole table dry overnight and then brought this pretty table inside for sealing. Okay, I got out my little can of Jolie finishing wax in clear and my big waxing brush, and just using a little bit of wax at a time, began working it into the table. I really try to make sure that I take the wax in all directions, so a swirling action as well as back and forth motions are good. And I will often get low and use the light of the room to make sure I can see I've hit every bit of the surface. Then I come back in with one of my lint-free cloths and wipe back any excess. I think the most common mistake with wax is the tendency to want to use a lot of it. But my understanding is that a little really does go a long way. For a table with this paint wash treatment on the top, the wax gives it a beautiful, low luster, rich silkiness without altering the color. Then I continued with the wax, getting all of the table legs and that lower level, and wiping back the excess as I went. Okay, do you remember our ragged and rust-colored, stained and somber console table? And bibbity, bobbity, boo. My word, methinks she's ready for the ball. Her new neutral dress has refreshed and enlivened our heroine. The carved and rolling details are all at once highlighted and modernized in our single medium paint. while those horizontal veneers are quietly stealing the show. Ready with her welcoming neutrality, she can support whatever color punch her homeowner would like to feature. This modern, hardworking princess is stunning with her unfussy, unfettered, and undeniably intelligent approach to the to-finish design. Honestly, if I had had a spot for it, I might have kept this one. My girls were certainly circling, but alas, 'twas not to be. So let's talk about why this project is so fantastic, especially if you are a beginner. Number one, it's forgiving. If you get a little wash or a little paint in an area they weren't supposed to go, it's easy to fix. Number two, it's fast. A traditional oil stain takes 72 hours minimum to dry. If you have a weekend to complete your project in, you can do it with this technique. Number three, it's environmentally friendly. I used Fusion Mineral Paint, which is a zero VOC product. And number four, cost. There is no extra can of stain to purchase, no extra can of stain conditioner to purchase. In many ways, this is really a single product project. And let's talk about those numbers. I was able to paint wash and paint this whole table with only half of that jar of paint. So my paint costs were really only at about $12. Add in another, say, $10 for painter's tape, wood filler, and that little bit of wax, and my total costs were a fantastical $22. All told, this table took me a little under 4 hours to complete. The techniques I used were fairly basic and straightforward, so when thinking about how I would calculate my cost of time, I used $40 an hour. But when I looked at what other console tables were listing for in my area, I came up with a list price of $195. And it sold for that within a day, giving me a profit of $173. Not bad. Thank you. But if you're sick of all this light and bright crap, tune in next week when we explore a more interesting and, shall we say, darker side of the redesigned world. My dear, don't you have some orphan children you should be harassing right about now? Probably. Goody two-shoes. If you enjoyed today's story, please make sure to hit that subscribe button before you go, and also the notification bell, as I'm sure you don't want to miss part 2 of this very special tale. Thank you so much for joining us, my friends. We'll see you next time for more Furniture Fairy Fables.